Thank you very much. I got to be honest, I don't know. I might sit, I might stand. I feel like if I were standing that I would be looking down on you, and I don't want to be doing that. But also, I usually like to have some kind of podium to grip, because I feel like sometimes in the process of reading the poems I might fly away. So hopefully all of my energy will be in the poems, and in the energy to tell you how grateful I am. I see your faces. I do not recognize you, but I hope to repay the kindness you've shown me by coming to listen to a reading. That is entirely my desire, and I never take these opportunities for granted to read my work, so thank you very much. I'm going to read a couple of new poems, then I will read exclusively from Land of Fire, and happy afterward to answer any questions, and if not, happy to mingle around and share in the kindness from Nano and Natalie, from the Utah Humanities Festival, thanks to Willie and Michael in New Zealand, wherever you are, my friend. Nana was kind enough to buy some yerba mate, which I drink every day. This is mate cocido, and it always tastes terrible. And this is a particularly good kind of terrible, and I appreciate it. It's the kind, it just revives me, so I'll drink from that. When I grew up, it was a terrible shock to realize that all the people that I thought were adults and who were running things, in fact, even the leaders that we elect, were really just grown children. And in a way of wanting to write about that idea and wanting to write a poem for my country and to understand the mystery of age, I wrote this. This is, and it's also a subtweet for the president, this is Child and Big Toy. Child and Big Toy. They were calm because it had never happened before, because they thought it had, it must have when designed a tunnel to fit the child, but not the adult. Then how if a child crawled there and curled and closed her mouth? How to get the child out? Send another in. Send in someone small. They were calm, because everyone finds reasons to be calm when there's wind or sun or this coat at the base of the slide. It must be the child's. Come out, it's fine. Come on now, come out. They were wrong. All of them were wrong. Some thought a saw. Some thought calm down. They were getting somewhere with their thoughts. Part of the crowd was angry with the other part for making a crowd. So one crawled up into the tube until his chest stopped like his breath, and he saw something wrong. The sun made blue in the tube. Something about the sun and black streaks from shoes. The crowd saw the half of him left out kick, then kick wild, so they pulled the other half out. They sat him up and someone groaned. Someone said, enough now. Come on, sweetheart, enough. Come out. Then another crawled inside. Left her coat by the slide, past the streaks, saw the blue, smelled the plastic in her mouth that comes from plastic, having caught the sun at noon, the burning, soon night cooled. 1,000 black streak tallies to mark the cycle of shoes, then wider shoes of older children, pressed inside by two, to touch and make the space between them small. This one heard a sound. Someone's calling me, she thought. I'm found. So she crawled back, remembered all, moved aside. Another tried. Lost. Another tried. I've been writing poems, love poems, which are elegies, because I find love poems directly to be very difficult to write. So I wrote this poem for a friend of mine. His name was Travis Crane, who was a very absurd figure, very funny man. And I tried to match his humor, but could never do it. He was the kind of guy who owned the most hideous car that they only made once and stopped making after he drove it. It was so ugly. In LA one time, he went into a grocery store, and when he came back out, the car was gone. So he called the cops. They found it a mile away. And when they came to him, they said, "Sir, you need to understand that this car is in very bad shape. And prepare yourself when you see it." And when he saw the car, it was in the exact shape that he had drove it. That it was as hideous as the car he drove. And I loved him. And in a way, I wanted to speak for him and for what it means, for what high school means for a lot of people. This poem is High School. You're dead now and have been for years. And so is high school, which I loved and you hated that I loved. I teach in one. You would love that. The way you loved to hate spread fast in high school. Like the humidifier stream of air you drew in to conjure sleep. Like the red across your face, the color of the plastic shape we cut then buffed in shop glass until it gleamed in the last building left designed for beauty and not the utility we hated in high school. You hated your face, that it could not gleam. That all the bottles of soap and cream you drained to make it heal could fill a shop room full, or just that darkened space retracting bleachers make when pulled to hold a school. The student body, that cruel reminder of the tunnel ground beneath our feet. You made a room there to wait out pep rallies, to know the sound applause makes underneath its sound. They were cheering for the team. They go on cheering, burying your face, though I've stopped looking. In all my high school dreams, I am waiting for the rally, for the hate to leave my body through their hands, all their shouting to be seen, unseen. I still hear you clapping underneath. Thank you for that. Thank you. Stanford has a long, I was lucky to be there for a couple of years. It was insane. And we lived very poorly in the most expensive county in the country, my wife and two boys. Has a mile-long arboretum. And I would walk that often. And I happened to be back for a conference last year and lost my father a few months before. And in walking back to that place, I wrote this poem. And then I'll jump into the land of fire. When, in that country, what is beautiful must take a long time to walk to. Walking there after a long time, I will see you stand and not run, and not run. You will not be waiting for me. You will have something new in that country to walk to when I come. When I come, everything behind me will become beautiful to you when I reach you, because I reach you. So Land of Fire was born of many things, and at the heart of the book is this poem Caballero that I want to read for you. And in 2007, Chevy Suburban rolled carrying 14 undocumented immigrants, and 8 of them died. And there was a disagreement as to why. And when I read that in the newspaper, I became obsessed with it. And of course, that's one crash of the many that happen all the time in this country, in this part of the country. And I tried to write the poem as a documentary poem by including language from different texts, and I couldn't do it until I started to write about myself through personal implication. I am the child of an immigrant, a family of immigrants, but I am not. And I was born a citizen of this country. And so, how could I write this poem? I started to write the poem through teaching Spanish to my son. And it begins with 2 epigraphs. It's at the heart of this book, and I thought I'd read it first and then conclude with a poem that maybe responds back to it. Caballero. My Argentine mother would say caballero, Mario, but there's different ways of saying these words. Caballero. I should say that caballo, of course, is a horse, and caballero would be literally horseman, but it's really moving from lots of different iterations to now mean gentlemen. Damas y caballeros. Ladies and gentlemen. Caballero. Rigoberto Salas Lopez, 30, was charged with transporting illegal immigrants resulting in death. 8 of the 14 people in the Chevy Suburban died after it rolled several times on US 191 a few hours before dawn Monday. Salas Lopez, originally from Guatemala, told investigators he swerved to miss a horse. He was arrested after fleeing into the desert in the Four Corners area of Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado. The Associated Press, April 17th of 2007. And the second epigraph. The passengers say no. He wasn't swerving to miss a horse. That he was fondling a female passenger in the front seat of the vehicle. Sergeant Rick Eldridge in the Salt Lake Tribune. Caballero. Say it was a horse. That the horse watched the 3-ton van roll until it stopped where their bodies stopped. That the horse, unlike a horse, waited until he stood. Say it was the horse he followed in the desert. Say it was the desert, the sagebrush that kept the horse. Say it was the trail he left, the patrolman followed, that they never found the horse, that he covered the horse tracks in the desert with his own. The sergeant doesn't find the wreckage first. When he asks the survivors how many cars passed in the desert 3 hours before morning, they tell him they remember only one, that someone moved the bodies from the road and drove away. In their language, they say this road is a river nothing gathers. The sergeant asks to see their driver, and one points to the desert. The rest point to the woman he reached for, a hole the body left passing through the windshield. Son, in Spanish, you do not agree. You must be in agreement, estar de acuerdo. Two people may agree or disagree like we do, but they must also be in one or the other. If you mistake cuerdo for cuerda, you will have said rope or cord, though both words divide and bind some older form of agreement. As a boy, I saw the model of the spinal cord, how the nerves run down, divide us behind. They named it cara equina, horsetail, buried cord. In his dream, the sergeant takes a shovel to the river to hold the river back. He is told he will find nothing, to keep nothing he finds. The sergeant stands in the river until his feet freeze, until they lose their hold, until it is the shovel itself he holds to keep from slipping under. The river is choked with debris. It is a bird's nest finally that passes, convincing him. Inside, he sees small branches woven, then string, then needles, clothing, then hair. He untangles the nest to braid a rope. Say the 3 names he gave the sergeant were true. Say the names of the 8 bodies pulled from the wreckage became the numbers they first labeled them by. Say the 8th is no longer nameless. Say they still tie ropes to the caskets of immigrants they find in the desert. That a rope saves time should someone come looking. Say they bury the ropes for the dead to climb back. Say their names. Son, do not mistake cabello for caballo, hair for horse. That caballero, though gentleman, meant horseman. You've heard the Spanish conquered Mexico on their horses. You've heard the conquered could not tell the man from horse, and ask me, how do we know the conquered knew? They listened. The horses never spoke. Is your father a caballero? No. I'm not a horse, son. No. There are no horsemen. No. Not every man is gentle. Thank you for that. Yesterday in Salt Lake City, I was with my mother the whole day. And she causes a lot of trouble wherever she goes. And I endured it. Because I love her. And we stumbled, literally. We'd crossed one of these enormous Utah streets that I miss so much. takes forever to cross these streets. And there was the courthouse where she became a citizen 23 years ago. And there it was. And I took a picture of her. And I said, I will read this poem for you. This poem is The Oath. They took the first card that marked her alien when she answered declaration. When she knew the names of statues, they took her fingerprints and weighed her. Then they took her from her children to ask her questions, take her picture. I watched her when she stood in line with others, taking turns, reciting words to make them citizens. Some were taken out to smaller rooms before their turn. Some returned. In the oath, my mother cleared her throat before a word, then said the word, made the same sound I knew to listen for when I had lost her in a crowd in the aisles of a store. The sound was louder than the oath. It meant her lungs were still shaped by 30 years of foreign air despite the vow that made her one of us. They took her country when she spoke, but the chords that first learned Spanish in her throat spoke first. Last strain of loss and its resistance. Sometimes I go through this book and poems sort of call out to me, mostly because they never get read. They just sit in the book and are angry. And then I pass the page and realize that I'm talking to the page and realize that poets are strange people. I was making a set list today, which is kind of an exciting thing. This is likely to be my last sort of reading from this book. It's been a year and a half. I started reading in Boston with a friend whose entire family was from there. And so I knew no one. And it was a beautiful reading. Last night I read in Salt Lake and had lots of family there. And here I am in this place, so close to where a lot of the poems have their landscape. So I'll only read a couple more. Grateful for your patience and kindness. I'll read a poem that got me into trouble. When you write about your family, anticipate that someday you will have to confront your family. And maybe I didn't anticipate it. This is about Jorge, who is my tío and lives in Mar del Plata, Argentina. And this is the title of the poem, Jorge, First Love of My Argentine Mother. And everything in this poem is true in the eyes of a child. Jorge, first love of my Argentine mother. In the 86 Renault you drove from the sea to Tandil. On the beltless front seat bar between you and my American father, I slept but could not dream. When I woke, it was as one wakes to voices aware of others sleeping in the car, but no one was speaking. We were the only two awake. When you spoke, you sounded like a man ignored, one orphan speaking to another who was not. I knew only what they told me. She couldn't love you back. That you married her sister Alba when she left and raised your sons in Mar del Plata, miles from that coast and crowded sand. That once, along some shoreline road, you lost your brakes, turned and rolled the first Renault you drove in 76. That crawling out alone, you tried to free my mother's legs still pinned between the seat and frame, and that my father, unseen from the car that ran behind, found my mother's head and arms and pulled her from the other side until she screamed. We could have torn her at the waist. She chose what she could see, kicked until your hands let go. I think it was the bar not meant to hold a child that woke me. How it rattled first and then grew hot beneath our weight. Or the narrow air inside the car, The 86 not meant to carry those passengers, Susana, Alba, and Abuela in the back, my father buried in his snore, or the road, despite its track through open pampas, not cut straight, that drew the length between the sea and Tandil. I think it was your question about distance in my ear. I feel like I need to read one more poem for Jorge. For Jorge. You know this. When I flew in today, enormous circles in the landscape, and the long sort of arm that reaches out and waters some kind of crop. I am completely ignorant and trying to sound smart about what that is. I have no idea. But here in Utah, we know about irrigation. So when I was a boy, I had to move the pipes. We had to unbuckle all the pipes, the ones that didn't move on the wheels, ourselves, and move them, and move them, and move them, and rebuckle, and do that over and over again. And so this is a poem in two parts. The title of the poem is Two Men Cry. My father wakes his sons to move pipe. Lift from the center, he says, the equal weight on either side, bright morning, smell of pollen, or the crop we're sent to water. Sometimes the pipes still have water. So Gabby, the oldest, lifts one by the center. Behind my father pours the heavy water down his back cold, across his shoulders, and his cry is primal, deepest shock. In the bus station, already erased by exhaust, the idling engines of Mar del Plata. We are leaving, everyone. My mother left in Argentina before she married my father. Jorge, her first love, first to see us off, is lifting a suitcase into the bus, turns it on its side, then looks back to help my father with another, and his face, his cry, the same, his shock. We didn't know the pipe had water. We couldn't lift it up. I want to end with this poem, The Ground. So I had never gone to the crash site for Caballero. I knew in the aftermath that of the 8 bodies, only one they weren't able to identify. And so they sent the body back from Salt Lake City to Blanding. And the unnamed male was buried in an unmarked plot in Blanding City Cemetery. In Caballero, there's a line that I took from the newspaper, which was that they tie ropes around the caskets of immigrants to make it easier to find should someone come looking. And so it was only when I came to the Blanding City Cemetery and I walked in and I was looking for where he could be that I realized I was somebody who had come looking. And I say this every time and I mean it, I wasn't the right one to come looking. And I hope that his family finds him. But it moved me deeply, and I sat in the grass, and this polyvocal poem came to me. The voices that could be asking questions around the event itself. And so I wrote this poem, The Ground. It usually has an epigraph from Caballero, but because you heard it, I think we know. Again, thank you so much for letting me come and for listening. The Ground. Say it was a man. It was. There is a boy mowing the cemetery lawn. He is perfect at cutting close. Go in. How will I know when it's close? The ground, unpacked above his box, remade the box above the ground. Sit down. Say he sat down. Where? It matters that they sat so close. How many? 14. Make room. The mower stops to move a vase. The sweetest dream that labor knows. His space marked at the gate. Unknown male. What could he do in the van without space? Say he was sleeping. Did he dream? Yes. and after the crash, died in the dream, inside, or woke in the sand, the brush, the ground was his dream, legs pulled up in a van, dream of ground, under now. Wake up, the mower says. He has stopped where I lie, his face. You have aged, I say. Wake up. I am looking up. Will you still age? His face has changed. Thank you very much.